Hey there, Scaling Up Nation. It's Trace Blackmore here with a shout out to all the hardworking water traders out there. You deserve a partner who's just as dedicated as you are. That's why I want to introduce you to my friends Sarah, Drew, Dave, and the rest of the crew at North Metal and Chemical Company. North Metal isn't just about delivering high-quality chemicals. They're about delivering exceptional support from experienced professionals who understand our industry inside and out. Their unmatched service means they're ready to ship your Northwest brand chemicals when you need them, no matter the challenge. With their commitment to small businesses and long-term partnerships, North Metal and Chemical Company is here to help you succeed every step of the way. Visit scalinguph2o.com/north today and learn how they can support your water treatment goals. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/north. North Metal and Chemical Company, serving the water treatment industry since 1921. Hey there, Scaling Up Nation. It's Trace Blackmore, and I want to highlight how Aquaphoenix Scientific is making lost data, surprise overages, and unreliable water system connectivity a thing of the past. Meet Flight by Aquaphoenix Scientific, the future of smart water system connectivity. Flight is more than just a modem. It's a managed service built to keep your water systems online, optimized, and hassle-free. With multi-carrier failover, no data overages, and real-time monitoring, Flight automatically switches networks if one drops, optimizes your telemetry, and keeps your systems running smoothly. So you can stop rolling trucks and start saving time and money. Flight, simple, secured, supported. Head over to scalinguph2o.com/APS. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/APS. Aquaphoenix Scientific, your one-stop solution for smart water and chemical management. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, happy Industrial Water Week. Well, of course, that's what we were celebrating all last week. And Nation, that is our Super Bowl. That is the number one holiday that we celebrate here at the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We are always looking for new things to do during Industrial Water Week, ways to bring the audience, the Scaling Up Nation, into the Scaling Up H2O podcast and into Industrial Water Week. And Nation, the best time to start planning for next year is right now. So if you have any ideas for us on some things that you'd like to see for Industrial Water Week next year, please don't keep those to yourself. Go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our show ideas page, and let us know what that is. We had so many people join us last week. Of course, we had returning guests that were guests on our show for the previous year. They wished us happy Industrial Water Week in the theme days that they spoke on. We have received a lot of great feedback about that. That's something we're starting to do with all the guests that we record now. We ask them if there's something that they want to talk about during Industrial Water Week. And Nation, I am just ecstatic about how many people are celebrating Industrial Water Week this year. Now, this was the 7th or 8th year that we've celebrated Industrial Water Week, and it is getting bigger each and every year. And I saw so many posts on social media where companies were celebrating Industrial Water Week. I saw your Careers Friday end of Industrial Water Week cakes that you all shared with hashtag IWW25. And by the way, if you have not gone to hashtag IWW25, you can see all of the posts that the Scaling Up Nation has posted to Industrial Water Week 2025. And I have to say, this is a really great way for you to kind of ground yourself with how big the industrial water treatment industry is. There are so many people that are involved in the industrial water treatment industry, and a lot of times we just see them or just a few of them at several conventions, and we kind of wonder, how large is this industry? Or I feel like I'm alone, and is there anybody else that's going through similar issues that I am experiencing? Well, I have to tell you, during Industrial Water Week, that always sets me straight with how many people are in this industry. And it allows me to realize that we are all part of something that's way bigger than ourselves, but we have a part in making our industry better. And that is the call of this podcast. How do we help raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry? We say that we like to do that an episode at a time, a listener at a time, a Scaling Up Nation member at a time. So all of us together, imagine the bar that we can lift. That's a heavy bar, but with all of us reaching in and sharing the weight distribution, we can raise that bar higher than we ever could on our own. But it all starts with us, and everything that we do on each and every day, that makes a difference in the industry. And that's what Industrial Water Week is all about. Now, one of my favorite things during Industrial Water Week is always Detective H2O. James McDonald came up with this character probably about a decade ago. And James and I love to collaborate on things that we are going to do, not only in this podcast, but how are we going to raise the bar with Industrial Water Week celebrations? And that's what we came up with this year, that we were going to not just do a Detective H2O for each episode that we release during Industrial Water Week, because we've done that pretty consistently for the last couple of years. We said, what if there was a brand new Detective H2O each and every day last week? And we did that. And let me say, that was no small feat. That was very large feat. And with those feats, lots of people got in those shoes. They helped us out. And we were able to produce a brand new episode each and every day last week. And of course, that started off with the case of singing canary, and that was with our special guest, Laith Charles. Now, Laith Charles has been on this podcast several times. He was a member of the Rising Tide Mastermind, and he was also the first recipient of AWT's Rising Star Award. So, Laith, thank you for helping us out with some great content, and you did a great job last week. And then on Tuesday, we heard the case of having the blues, and that was with our special guest, Frank LaCrone, President and CEO of Aquaphoenix Scientific. Now, I told you on previous episodes that all of our special guests have been on the podcast before. And I had a couple people push back and said, hey, you never had Frank on the podcast. But yes, we have had Frank on the podcast. He just has not had his own show. And Nation, don't worry, we are going to have Frank with his own show. And if you're wondering when that is, that's going to be episode 451, coming out November 21st. Now, Frank has been on when we normally go to different conventions, and Frank is at his booth and he's telling us all the great things that are going on. So he has been on the program before. So I appreciate all the people that wrote in saying that he was not, but I assure you he was, and he's going to get his very own episode on episode 451. And then, of course, on Wednesday, you heard a very familiar voice. Yes, that was me, and that was the case of the unwanted foam party. And this one was a real treat for me because this actually happened. This was in the files of Trace Blackmore. This very scenario happened. And with this, James allowed me to write this Detective H2O. So James created this genre, this beloved character, and he said, Trace, you are welcome to write one of the stories. Now, I will say, James corrected some of my verbiage and some of the things that I said to make sure it was absolutely 100% true to Detective H2O. And with that, we had the case of the unwanted foam party. I think everybody guessed that voice last week. And then a voice that, if you're a member of AWT, you know it. Of course, that was Angela Pike, and that was too much of a good thing. And Angela is the membership director of AWT. She is probably the voice of AWT. Everybody hears Angela and they just identify the Association of Water Technologies. Now, we've asked Angela to come on again. She has been on the podcast before when we were talking about the CWT, but that was years ago. That was back 2018, I believe. We are far overdue for getting Angela back on the podcast. So we are trying to schedule something with her so you can hear that quintessential AWT Scottish accent on Scaling Up H2O again. And then we rounded out Careers Friday with Mark Lewis and James Courtney, and that was the case of knowing it all. Now, all of these people, thank you so much. This, as I said earlier, was not easy to put together. We, of course, had to have recording time. Many of the recordings were in person, and I met with these individuals when we were at different conferences or different trainings. With Frank LaCrone, I actually went down to see him in Key West. And we also did the interview that you were going to hear on November 21st. So lots of legwork went into making not just the Detective H2O. There was a lot to be done there, and James McDonald did the lion's share of that work. But then all of the things that we put together for last week, I want you to know that we really take Industrial Water Week seriously, and we know that you take Industrial Water Week seriously. And the reason that we do that is we want to make sure that we are celebrating the most amazing industry on the planet. And of course, that is industrial water treatment. So Scaling Up Nation, I just want to thank you for making last week's Industrial Water Week 2025, the best industrial water week yet. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for all of your postings, your social media postings. Thank you for contacting me with different ideas for next year. And I know you got an idea that you're going to share with me. So thank you in advance for sharing that idea with me. And I just want to thank you for making this industry better. Because of you making this the best day in industrial water treatment that you have ever had, and you do that by trying new things, by asking new questions, by learning new things, you are raising the bar in the industrial water treatment industry. And because of that, we are all lifting that bar and we are making the industry bigger and better each and every day. So one more time, happy Industrial Water Week. I know we're a week off, but I am just so excited about it. And somebody else that is just as excited about it as I am, here's our friend James McDonald with a brand new What Do You Know?
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, what do we call the liquid formed after steam does its work and has cooled below its dew point? It is called condensate. It can be a valuable water source to return to the steam boiler system due to its heat content and purity. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Nation, I hear from so many of you out there that you are learning about the next event that you are going to attend by listening to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. So, Nation, here it is. Here are a couple events that I think you need to look into. The first one is taking place November 4th through 7th, and that is Green Build 2025. That is taking place in Los Angeles, California, and is hosted by the U.S. Green Building Council. We have several people, including myself, that are green associates or lead GAs. We also have other people that are lead accredited professionals like myself. Nation, if you want to find out more about Green Build, please go to our webpage, scalinguph2o.com. Go over to our events page, and we will have everything on this and other conferences. But let me tell you, if you have never been to Green Build, it is an amazing. There are some amazing papers there, but the trade show, the expo floor is just amazing. You are going to see technology there that is cutting edge. You will get blown away by some of the things that you will see there. And of course, we're going to have people in the Scaling Up Nation there that are going to be reporting back to us on what they saw there. Maybe you'll hear that on some future episodes. But make sure you check out Green Build. I know that you will be glad that you did. And then something else that I know you are going to want to attend, and this is one that I am going to be at. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Association of Water Technologies annual conference and expo. That is taking place November 12th through 15th. And Nation, this is 3 action-packed days of learning, growing, finding inspiration, and being able to talk with every single water treatment vendor that most likely you will ever need in an industry like industrial water treatment. It is an amazing conference. It's one that I am looking forward to. I will share something with you. For the past couple of years, I have submitted an abstract to the AWT to speak on a particular topic, and it never got picked up. So I submitted 4 abstracts this year. Well, Nation, what do you know? They actually picked up all 4 abstracts. So not only am I going to speak on the topic that I had proposed years before, but I'm going to be speaking on 3 others. So Nation, if you're going to be at AWT, I sure hope that you are in the audience on one of the papers that I'm going to speak of. As we get closer to AWT, I'll tell you a little bit more about those. But I want you to make sure that you attend this conference if you're in the same type of water treatment that I am. It is going to be a great networking event. We, of course, will have our scaling up buttons there. So be sure to come find me or somebody in the Scaling Up Nation. We'll have a bunch of people walking around with them so you can proudly display that Scaling Up H2O button. And the whole point of that is for you to be able to meet more people more easily, because that breaks the ice. You can simply walk up to somebody and say, hey, I listened to that podcast too. What's one of your favorite episodes? And there you go. The ice you can just hear shattering, and you might have met a new water treatment bestie just right there in the exhibit hall. And who knows, maybe there are 2 different papers that are at the exact same time and you want information on both. You just met somebody that can go to the other paper, and now maybe over dinner you can talk about what you each learned in your paper discussions. Nation, we try to make it easy for you. Again, that's the AWT November 12th through 15th. And Nation, if you are an owner of a water treatment company, you want to get in a day early, November 11th, for the business owners meeting. And Nation, there are always great speakers at the business owners meeting, so you're going to want to make sure that you attend that as well. Now, right after the AWT, you are going to be sad because you had a great week, and now the week is over, and you miss all the people that you just met. Well, don't worry. we've got a solution for you because we are having the hang the week after. So November 20th is going to be the hang. And folks, we're going to continue the conversations that we started at the Association of Water Technologies annual convention and expo. So if you haven't been to a hang before, super simple. It starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It goes exactly to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And during that time, I'll catch you up on some current events, and then I will make the easiest networking opportunities for you that you have ever had. And I've had several people tell me that they have come to the hang with an issue they were unable to solve, and they left with a resource that helped them solve it. So, Nation, make sure you are taking advantage of the hang. Go to scalinguph2o.com/hang, sign up. You will be glad that you did, and I can't wait to see you not only at the hang, but also at the AWT. Nation, I only have a few moments to talk about these events, and there are so many more that I haven't talked about. But you can find those very easily by going to scalinguph2o.com and then going over to our events page, and we'll have everything there. Well, Nation, our next guest I have known for probably about a decade. I met him at an AWT event, and we have just been connected ever since that event. I want to say it was about 10 years ago. So if you're wondering who I'm talking about, you're going to find out, because here's that interview. Scout Up Nation, we have not one but two lab partners today. Please welcome Danielle Scimeca, president of Fact Water Company, and returning guest Conor Parrish, chief growth officer of Fact Water Company. Welcome you both to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thanks, Trace.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, super excited to have you both back. Conor, I think this is time number 4 you've been on the podcast, if my count is right.
I believe so. Yeah, it's amazing to think, huh?
And Danielle, this is number 1, but this is going to be the best one that Conor has ever done. I have no doubt about it.
Exactly.
Conor, we were thinking, I think it was back in 2016, we were at a committee meeting for the Association of Water Technologies, and you leaned over and you said, you really need to do a podcast. Well, look what happened.
Here we are. What is that? Like a decade later almost. So
8-9 years ago. It's hard to believe. And at the time, I was just learning to enjoy podcasts. And I have to tell you, I'm so glad that you gave me that advice. You were the second person that advised me to do that. But this is one of my favorite things to do now. So thank you for suggesting that.
yeah, absolutely. I thank you for, I guess, listening to my idea or suggestion and doing what you do for the community. So it's great.
Yeah, back in March of 2021, you came on and you turned the tables on me. You interviewed me. That was one of our more successful podcast episodes. So thank you for being willing to interview me and ask me questions that the Scaling Up Nation wanted to know.
Of course. Well, thanks for allowing it.
Well, Danielle, I want to get you introduced to the Scaling Up Nation. Do you mind telling them a bit about yourself?
I'm Danielle. I've been with Fact Water Company now since, I believe, 2018. Previously, before that, I was working at a law firm out in the Carolinas. I have 2 little kiddos that keep me busy outside of the Fact Water world, and I love working at Fact. I love working with Conor.
Conor, do you mind reintroducing yourself to the Scaling Up Nation?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot has changed since the last time I was on here. So I think there's some good to update. I'm a father now. I have a 2-year-old son. So it's kind of crazy to see the journey of like where we are to, where we were and all of that. But I live in Fort Collins. Danielle and I, of course, work really closely together. In fact, I tend to focus more on the kind of external facing growth, customer technical side of things. And Danielle more on the like operations, P&L, things like that. But we have a really strong partnership and we work closely together there. So I'm happy to dive into any other intro stuff you might have, but that's kind of the 30,000 foot view for Scaling Up Nation.
Conor, you and I are members of the Rising Tide Mastermind, and you let us know that you were trying Culture Index, the Culture Index program. And we're going to be talking about that, plus a lot of other things that you guys have been doing in your company. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of great information from this episode. So, how about we start there? What is the Culture Index program, and why did you seek it out, and how do you use it?
So let's see. We've been using now Culture Index since I want to say October of 2023. It was introduced to me over the summer of 2023 through, I'm a part of a Northern Colorado business group. And through that, our consultant, her name's Randy, she came in and sort of did Culture Index on us and some people on our team. And I thought it was super interesting. So I brought it to Connor. I said, hey, just FYI, look at this. Isn't this cool? We had a meeting with Randy, and then, there was this introduction to the program. I, of course, had, 10 other things on my plate, and I move fast. So I was like, well, probably not, but like, that's cool. And Connor was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think this could be a game changer for our business. And it totally has been.
So I'm curious, how are you guys using it? What did it tell you that you didn't already know? And then what did you start doing after you know?
So high level culture index is a tool that we use. It starts with the culture index survey. That's the first thing that you do with your team or yourself. And that's two questions. So it always seems, really simple, and it's kind of amazing what ultimately comes out of it. But it's two questions. The first one basically being something along the lines of select the words that are most representative of how you see yourself in the world. And the second one is select the words that you see yourself as you have to perform your job today. Something along those lines, right? One is about you yourself and how you're in the world. The other one is how you're having to behave at work. And that's it. Those are the questions, and there's probably 100 words. They're the same for each question, and you just pick as many or as few as you feel appropriate on that given day. And so what ultimately happens from that process is a graph is generated, and there are several, let's say, data points on that graph. So, and again, without having the visuals and things like that, it can be a little bit challenging, but there's four, let's call them traits, and then three additional items that are being measured. So the first four traits are autonomy. So this is your A score, and that's going to be, are you
I think of it as, are you about me or are you about we? So people tend to fall, on the high end, they're more about their goals, their interests. They also tend to move, this is the gas. So they tend to move a bit faster than the people that are we, more team oriented and about the collective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Danielle. And I think with all of these traits that I'm about to kind of describe, there is no right or wrong or good or bad. It's just different, right? And the way that they're presented on the survey is a bell curve, actually. So there's this red line that shows up in the middle of the survey, and where your dot for each letter is relative to that line is where you sit on a bell curve for that specific trait. So if you're right in the middle, your 50th percentile, you kind of split between high autonomy or low autonomy or the other traits. And the further you get away from that red line, the more extreme you are for that given trait, the more obvious, let's say, and pronounced the features of that trait might be. So the first one, autonomy. The second one is social ability. So if you're a high B, that's the letter for this one, you are very social, you like people. And if you're a low B, you're more analytical. You tend to want data, you inward thinking, you're more skeptical. It's not really introverted, extroverted per se, but a lot of times, people think of it that way. But, again, more social, more analytical. The third one is pace. So if you're a high C, that's actually lower pace. So you like structure. You like to work from a list. You like to know what's going to happen next. You like to see that process.
You're very methodical in nature.
You're very methodical in nature. And if you're a low C, you can bounce between things. You like that change. You can work fast. Interruptions aren't as disruptive to your workflow, your workday. And in fact, the lower the C, the better you do if you are, working with those interruptions and kind of jumping between things. The third of the letters is D, and that is conformity. But high D, think of it as attention to detail. Do you dot your I's? Do you cross your T's? Do you want to make sure everything's perfect? Do you want to know the answer before moving forward? And then a low D is more of a dreamer, big picture, ideas. We'll figure it out as we go. Creative, maybe, right? So, again, each of these are on a spectrum, and everyone sits somewhere on there on each of these four traits. And so when you get your graph, you're either a high, A, B, C, or D, or low. And there's many, many, many combinations as you could imagine. So that red line I was talking about is referred to as the EU, which is energy units. And so this one is a little bit harder to explain, but basically the lower that number, the faster you burn out if you're operating outside of trait, or outside of your pattern. So if you're having to modify your behavior at work, in life, whatever. So if you're a high A, but having to behave as a low A, whatever, the sooner you hit this point where you're starting to become frustrated and burn out, but the quicker you can recover. So it's quick to burn out, quick to recover. The higher that EU gets, you can take that working outside a pattern for much, much longer. But when you finally hit that breaking point, it takes you a lot longer to recover, and it's a little bit more, dramatic or so something along those lines if you do hit it. And so the EU is a tool that we use, one, to just kind of understand that about, ourselves, our employees, our team. But then this graph is generated both, the top graph never changes. The first time you do it, it locks it in. And then you also get a bottom graph, which is that second question. And that is your job behaviors. And so the idea is you start to compare the two, who you naturally are versus how you're having to show up at work, and seeing how much alignment there is. And there's a lot of ways you can interpret that, but the EU is an important piece of that, because the further the EUs differ, either high or low, it tells you either signs of burnout or disengagement. And it tells you, hey, we need to potentially do something about this.
Or certainly have a conversation, understand what might be going on with that person.
Yep. And then the last two are going to be logic and ingenuity. Logic is just 0 to 10, and you fall somewhere, on that range, that scale. And 10 being all of your decisions, everything you do is all logic, no emotion, right? You don't factor emotion into your decision making, your conversations, whatever that might be. And then as you come all the way down towards 0, 0 being you wear your heart on your sleeve, you're very emotional, and that is kind of the first thing that is influencing your, conversations, behaviors, et cetera. And so someone with a 10, almost robotic. I'm a 10. I get made fun of all the time. Someone with a 0, it's like they can almost feel how the other person is emotionally when they walk into a room. Like they can be like, what's wrong? I know something's wrong. Whereas I'd be like, they could probably be, crying in front of me and I wouldn't notice. Right. So there's the 0 to 10 on the logic. And then the ingenuity is, do you come up with novel ideas, things that have never been thought of before? So if you're a 10 on that, this is like you're conjuring up new ideas that no one else has ever thought of. So the example that we always get in this, and maybe this is a controversial name in this day and age, but Elon Musk is always an example of like a 10 on logic, or maybe Thomas Edison, the kind of inventors that are, creating things that really no one else has thought of before. And then all the way down to, a 0, which is you take from the past and history and you apply that knowledge to solving problems versus creating something completely new. And of course, in between is some combination of all of that. So that is very high level culture index program. And of course, that's the survey results. And we can start to talk about some of the other pieces that we can do to use it in terms of quarterly employee surveys, some of the hiring tools and all of that. But that really is the essence of like what we're looking at, is all of this data that we now have about ourselves and about our team.
So I'm assuming all this information is on some sort of dashboard and you can see the individual as well as the teams that they're on. And then you can take that and make sure that the right person is in the right seat. Is that where you're going with this?
That's certainly part of it. Definitely. We send these surveys out. I think Connor mentioned it quarterly. So, one quarter, you might be just nailing it. Your top survey is matching your bottom survey, your EU's in range. We all feel good about that. You feel good, the employer feels good. But then another quarter might pop up and we might see some things go awry. We might see someone who's a naturally really high A start coming back to that line, maybe even creeping on low A. That's a problem. We got to talk about that. We might see an EU that's really low. Okay, is there something going on at work? Are you disengaged? I think it can be an indicator of like, what's the term now? Quiet quitting is kind of popular. So it can be, a gauge of like, okay, is this person kind of checked out? Or is there something going on in their life that's consuming time, like mind share while they're at work? So we use it all the time to just gauge where employees are at on a quarterly basis. We also use it, and it's become very integral to our hiring process. And I think this is probably honestly the way we use it now the most, and where I see the most impact is through the hiring process.
So maybe we break down those two separate categories. Maybe we start with the coaching aspect, and then we can talk about how you use it to find the next best employee.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I think as a coaching tool, one, it's interesting, right? Because in the past, you have your quarterly one-to-ones and you kind of come and you prepare for them and you talk, and it's really just a matter of, what the employee is willing to share that day. Everyone shows up that day. Maybe I'm in a great mood. And so the meeting is great. Maybe they're whatever it might be. Right. And so in the past, it always felt like you're at the mercy of whatever is happening in someone's life in that specific day for the one-to-one. And what Culture Index allowed us to have was data to have a conversation around, right? You all of a sudden have, these graphs, and I'll add that everyone's bought into this. And I think that's the most important piece is when you first do culture index and then you kind of present the data and the patterns and all of that to the team. What's amazing is as you go through and interpret their results and they say, okay, you're the type of person that X, Y, and Z, you like this, you do this, and kind of go through the pattern in a way that we're trained to interpret it. Never once have we had an employee argue with us that their pattern was incorrect. And in fact, there's always this commentary around, well, how did you know that? How did you understand that about me from two questions where I picked words, right? And so that's kind of this universal reaction to the culture index survey of like this crystal ball aspect of like, who was watching me and how do you know these things about how I am? And so I think that's a really important point when you sit down with an employee on a one-to-one. Now all of a sudden, we've bought into it and they've bought into it, and they see how this is going to benefit them in the workplace because we're now having a conversation of, we fully understand who you are, how you like to work, what your preferences are for, autonomy, sociability, pace, conformity, all the things we just discussed. And now it's a matter of tailoring communication in that way. It's a matter of structuring the job, providing as much or as little guidance as they need. And so now we're talking about real data every time we have that conversation on our quarterly one-to-ones. And so when there is that deviation on that lower graph, it's like, okay, you're normally a high A, you've dropped to a low. Well, why is that? Or normally you're a low C, but here you have a super high C, which means you feel like you have this long list you're working through. What can we do to maybe help with that and get better alignment with that top graph? So it really helps us, have a better conversation in each of those meetings. And again, the really cool part is the employees they're bought in. And so it makes it a really interesting conversation.
So if somebody went from low to high, what would that conversation sound like?
So, I mean, it depends on which of the traits, of course, but anytime you're flipping, so either going low to high or high to low, that's the most painful for that person. on a day-to-day basis. And so that's what's going to be impacting that EU score. And are they, at risk of burning out? Are they at risk of quiet quitting? And so really the flipping, so when the dot crosses that center line, the center of the bell curve, that's saying basically your natural tendency is to do this. At work, you're having to do, this other opposite thing. And all of a sudden, normally you can say, I understand, here's what's been happening at work. They're working on this project and they don't have as much autonomy because they're having to follow a commissioning checklist, whatever it might be, right? And so really it's just, there's an obvious change and now we get to talk about it.
I think too, just to build off of what Conor was saying, it does come down to putting people in the right seats, like you mentioned, Trace. So, these employees might be out of range for maybe 1 quarter. You're like, okay, what's going on? 2 quarters, you're like, all right, can we get there? Is there a reason? Is there a roadmap? Maybe there is a reason. Like, hey, in a year, you're going to be right in the right seat, so it's okay. We're gonna deal with the pain. But it also uncovers issues that you didn't necessarily know that you had, and it forces you to make tough decisions. There's no question. Culture Index, the program, forces you to make tough decisions. The reality is that person just might not be in the right job. And it gives you a place of empathy when you're having that conversation with people like, hey, you deserve to be in a job that you find fulfilling, that you enjoy. And the reality is, your survey tells us you don't. And 9 times out of 10, they agree.
Yeah, that's honestly one of the more interesting and I would say unexpected parts of Culture Index is when you do have to have those really tough conversations with an employee about are they the right fit or make a change with an employee. It totally changes that conversation. And as Danielle said, it brings empathy into it. And in some ways, it brings agreement into it. Now, are people always, people aren't always happy to be having that conversation. It's a terrible conversation typically. But by the end of it, a lot of times they're like, you know what, you're right. I see this vision of what work could be like if I had better alignment with who I am in the world and how I like to show up. And you're just going to continually ask me to do the opposite. And I think it becomes pretty obvious that that's just not going to work long term.
So if there's another seat available that lines up better, then they're introduced to that seat. If there's not one available, then you support them as they find something that will truly make them happy?
Yeah. And honestly, there's been times we have, examples where, unfortunately there maybe wasn't a seat to move someone to. And, both Danielle and myself and our HR director, Kayla, have guided them and like, hey, you should be looking at this type of role, or have you considered X, Y, and Z? Because a lot of times they might not even know what job might be the best fit for them given their specific pattern. So it's been fun to, again, fun maybe is a bad word, but fun in a crappy situation to be able to provide some of that feedback and guidance.
Hold on to your test kits, folks. We're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Hey there, Scaling Up Nation. Trace Blackmore here, and I've got a special water treatment solution that can streamline your water treatment operations. I'm talking about Commonwealth Chemical Specialties. These folks aren't just another distributor, they're your partners at industrial water treatment success. Since 2014, they've been providing top-notch products across North America. We're talking biocides, scale inhibitors, corrosion inhibitors, biofilm control, membrane anti-scalants and cleaners, virtually everything for your water treatment needs. You name it, they've got it. And get this, they've got nationwide warehousing for quick delivery. No more waiting around when you need those critical products. But here's what really sets them apart. Their technical team, led by Lisa Corbett DiMartino, a chemist with over 35 years of experience, will work with you to find the best solution for your needs. They even offer technical training seminars to keep you and your team at the top of your game. When you're looking to source your industrial water treatment products or need expert advice, discover why Commonwealth Chemical Specialties is more than just a distributor. Head over to scalinguph2o.com/Commonwealth to find out more. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Commonwealth. Commonwealth Chemical Specialties, more than a distributor, discover the difference. And now, back to our interview. Danielle, we talked about how this is a great coaching tool. How can we use this to be a good hiring tool?
Sure. So this is really where I love Culture Index. Basically, just high level overview, what you do when you have a position that you need to hire, you create what's called a C job. You have a couple people in your organization or outside of your organization take a survey. It's not that 2-question survey Conor was talking about. It does take a little bit longer. But the idea is to come up with what ideal patterns fit that job. And so as you're hiring, all of those applicants come in and fill out the 2-question survey, and we measure their temperament to the results that the C job produced. And so really what this does is you set a threshold, a percentage of, okay, what percentage match am I going to hire to? If it's 65%, I'm not going to look at anybody that comes through the pipeline that's under 65% match or whatever you choose. And so, for some of these jobs, we might get 30 applications and maybe even more sometimes. And automatically we're cutting it down to the top 7 or less. And that might not necessarily, that it does not include, we're not looking at resumes. We're not looking at experience. We're not looking at your qualifications for the job. We're just looking at whether or not you will be a good fit. And why this is really important, we have found, is that you are like any of us. If you find a job that really matches your natural temperament, you're going to perform better. And your level of retention long term should be much higher than somebody who's just forcing it, for lack of a better word, every day. So that's how we use it. I think it also helps when you start with the program. Now, we kind of have done this. We could be better. But honestly, Randy might be rolling her eyes now. But you create these C jobs for the seats that you already have open. So when you're ready to hire, boom, it doesn't take long. You're ready to go. Anything I missed there, Conor?
No, I don't think so. I think, one of the sneaky benefits of this, right, is on the HR side, if you are getting, 30 applicants, the HR team doesn't have to screen all of those people and do pre-interviews or anything like that. You're automatically just removing people and not even looking at resumes until you know they're a match. Now, I will say there are times when you're not getting a lot of applicants and it can be frustrating and it maybe slows the hiring process down more. But I honestly, now in hindsight and having been through it a few times, I ask myself, can you imagine in the past, we were just hiring these people that are coming through early on who clearly we know now are not the right fit. But because of this, we've slowed down, we've held to our belief in the system and landed with people that are a much better fit. So it slows it down, but it saves time in a weird way, right? Like HR is not having to do, first interviews with 30 people. They're having to do first interviews with 3 to 5 people. And so I think that is a really interesting piece of it too.
Well, and the idea is that the turnover is greatly reduced. So it might take a little bit longer up front, but hopefully you're not doing this again in 6 months, 8 months, a year. Yeah, and we have hired to the job, and then there are times that Conor and I convince ourselves that we got it wrong and we should just hire outside of the pattern. And big shocker here, we regret it. So it's just once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's just kind of how it goes.
So here's the big question. My insider knowledge knows you not only took this program, you did everything that the program recommended, and you guys did a total restructure of your company based on the culture index. How did that go?
So we started Conor and I, we're very lucky. We have each other. I understand that a lot of business owners don't have that counterpart in the workplace, and we do. So we sat down like we usually do. We got together, and this was pre-culture index actually. And we just objectively asked ourselves, okay, by 2029 was our year for whatever reason. By 2029, our goal is X. will our team objectively get us there? It's a yes or a no. And we both decided that in a lot of ways, and in regard to a lot of individuals, the answer was unfortunately no. That didn't mean they were bad employees. They didn't do their job. They're bad people. They're great people. We enjoyed working with them. But just the reality is it didn't feel like it was working for them, and it didn't feel like it was working for us. And so we kind of started this mission pre-Culture Index. And Culture Index came along about 3 to 4 months into this. And it totally pushed us. And we moved a lot faster with that transition. I think, Conor, maybe you disagree, but I think the transition would have taken 2 to 3 times the amount of time it did without Culture Index.
Yeah, I think it absolutely would have. And we probably would have been like rehiring and like we wouldn't have landed where we landed as quickly as we did. But as far as forcing the moves, and I think you used this term earlier, once you understand and believe in Culture Index, you can't unsee the data once you have it. And so we kind of had this intuitive sense around, some of the changes we needed to make on our team and the direction that we needed to go. But now all of a sudden you have data staring at you. Like you're like, oh God, like I have to do something now, right? And so it really forced us to make the right but challenging decision faster. And ultimately then on the back end, when we're refilling that position or, restructuring the organization so we know what position we need to refill, it's allowing us to get the right person back into the seat quicker. And it's hard to even really now, in hindsight, look back at it and say, how would we have done this without Culture Index being here on the other side? Because we're about 15 months, I would say, post embarking on this kind of restructure, rebuild journey. And I think we probably turned over 95% of our field team and customer service and a few other positions. Like, not an inconsequential amount of work or people, right? And so at the time, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. But we had this conviction just both in the conversations that, Danielle and I had, our vision, and then now, slightly into that journey, then Culture Index kind of validating that of where we wanted to go. And it just really helped us stick to our guns and do it.
So I want to ask, what's your service team like now? And I also know you keep in touch with your previous team members. What are they saying about life in their job now?
So, first of all, where we are now versus where we were, it's a much different environment and it's a much better environment. I think we have a really strong team. And again, this isn't a judgment on the previous team. I think it really ultimately did come down to right person, right seat, and, seeing this clear misalignment on pattern versus what we need. So now we have people in the seats that have pattern alignment with what that C job said. They are much happier. They are more efficient. And, you hear a lot less of some of the chatter that we heard before. And the existing team, we hear things here and there. I wouldn't say we're like deeply in touch with all of them, but my sense of the matter is, they all ended up landing into, at least from my perspective, positions that I look at it now knowing what their culture index is, and I'm like, yep, they learned from this too, and they got into a better seat for themselves. So, I haven't directly heard this from any of them, and maybe some of them would still shake their fist and speak poorly of me, but it seems like they're in a much better spot, much better fit for their pattern, and hopefully they're now able to take that and run with it, and grow and end up in a place that is much better than they would have been with us when they're just kind of like beating their head against a wall doing something they didn't want to do.
Now, I'm sure you two just naturally get along with everything. But if there happened to be some sort of strife, some sort of conflict, can you provide a real example of how you use this?
So Conor and I do get along very well, but we also disagree quite frequently. And I have to laugh because before Culture Index, there were just times where Conor, I would just be so annoyed to be honest. Sorry, Connor. So like, what? Let it go. You do not need all the details. Like, we have to move. And he would be like, you are not detail oriented. You're dropping the ball. We have all these problems. And finally, Culture Index showed us, okay, that is coming from, I'm a low D. I am more, of a dreamer. I'm more creative. And I also have a high A. So I like to go really fast. So I'm all gas, no brake. Connor is also high A. So he likes to go fast too, but he's very detail oriented. And so whenever we find ourselves getting into a little scuffle, I would say it's like 90% of the time a difference of our Ds. He wants all the information, all the knowledge. He wants to cross every T and dot every I. And I just don't have time for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's the perfect example. And in fact, now it's nice because like the second it starts happening, one of us will be like, high D, low D conflict. Here it is. So like it just immediately reframes the conversation. And then I start to think, okay, how can I communicate this in a way that a dreamer who wants to move fast might respond to, and vice versa. She can now come to me with something she wants to get done with maybe a touch more detail that at least acknowledges the fact that, hey, there might be some things we don't know yet. I've considered that, but let's go anyways, right? And even that like simple suggestion immediately kind of takes me off of alert, and it's like, okay, let's do this, right? So the high D low D conflict, I think, is a real thing. And the next example that we'll talk about that happened with our production and customer service is also something that happens with me and my wife, who happens to be a high D as well, which is called tripping their D, is the term that they use in culture.
For the record, my D never gets tripped.
Yeah, you can only get a tripped D if you have a high D. So, anyways, the tripping of the D is basically two people that want all of the answers, want all of the knowledge, want all of the attention to detail. And when one of them feels like that's not being provided, or they're not able to provide that back and forth, and I guess it doesn't even necessarily have to be two people. It can just be one person who gets, their D tripped. But basically, it's someone with a high D who feels like that's not being met. Their needs aren't being met. And it causes them to kind of have a little bit of frustration, and they shut down a little bit. And it really can be problematic. But if you know what's happening and hey, this person just feels like things aren't being completed in the way that's correct, it allows you to address it. And so on our production and customer service side, our customer service person would get a call from a customer needing information about a delivery, right? And so he would go to the production person and ask for details around product availability or when something was going to be ready. And the production person would ask a bunch of questions that the customer service person didn't have answers to. The customer service person needed answers from the production person to be able to provide the answers. The production person answered, and they both would just spiral up into this major frustration of like, I need more information. I'm not getting the information, and just shut down. And it would create this huge conflict that was not productive. And then Danielle and I, usually both of us, would get a text and have to step in and kind of mediate. And as soon as we introduced Culture Index and we learned about this, tripping of the D, it was like, oh, this is like painfully obvious of what's happening. And it allows you to, one, communicate to each of them like, hey, this is what's happening. And, it's not the other person's fault. They're not trying to get you. It's not like anything malicious. And then two, it just takes the pressure off the situation in general. So
you both are able to coach through this. Do the team members get to a point where they recognize it themselves?
I think sometimes, yes. But, in those types of situations when it's escalating, there's just so much emotion. In that particular example, Connor mentioned the logic factor, the L. And this was also really important because they both had really high Ds, but one had a really high L, no emotion. And the other one had a really low L, super high emotion. And so they're getting into the scuffle. One is coming across as just not very friendly, and the other one is just really feisty and very emotional about the situation. And I think they start to recognize that in one another. And the idea is that they conform, how they're communicating. They take a step back, they take a deep breath, and they try to adapt their communication to the other person. We don't always see this, of course, but I do think in a lot of ways our team has gotten better. We actually, in a couple of those situations, we ended up deciding wrong person, right seat. So we didn't let that particular one mature very much, but we see it all the time. I think Conor sees it with his staff. You guys kind of talk to each other all the time, Conor, in certain ways with each other's patterns in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. On our team, we see it helping for sure. I mean, the most obvious, just because Danielle and I live and breathe it and talk about it all the time, is the communication between the two of us. But we can interject then with our team when we do see something happening and call out, hey, this person needs more information, or this person needs less information and wants to move. And the team gets it, right? And so now what may have been this like long winding conversation to try and unpack what was going on now is like succinctly captured in like a, hey, this is why it's happening, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to move on, and everyone's like, all right, yeah. So it makes that part easier when we do have to get involved.
So this works when employees are engaged with it, when the entire team is engaged with it. For some reason, whenever a company decides they're going to start a new assessment or a new program, it's met with suspicion before it's met with trust. How did you both work through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are still times when we send out the quarterly survey. There's a few people where I'm like, take your survey, take your survey, take your survey. And so you do naturally have that. But I feel like for a lot of these people, once they see the results of that initial survey and they see how accurate their temperament survey is, they buy in pretty much instantly because they're like, yeah, that's exactly who I am. And I think for a lot of people, they do recognize that it's a two-way tool. So it's a tool for us, but it's also a tool for them. And so I think that's what makes Culture Index a little bit different than the other types of surveys I see on the market is we're not just getting information for us, we're also getting it for you.
And I'll add that we are the first people of probably that are guilty of trying a bunch of different things and constantly bringing, hey, let's do this to our team and whatever. And so I will say when we did mention to everyone, hey, we're doing this thing, it's called Culture Index, I think there were certainly some eye rolls and all of the things that you might expect in that scenario. But as Danielle said, as soon as they saw it and they've lived it now for a little while, you don't get the comments anymore about it. And I think everyone really pretty much is on board. And I think that really is just because of that, for lack of a better word, crystal ball effect, that everyone kind of has that reaction of, wow, this is insane. I've never felt something so accurate, right? Because some of the other ones are good, but you're always like, well, I don't know. That doesn't feel like it's a perfect fit. But yeah, generally I do this thing that it's saying I should do. But really with Culture Index, because it's not, one of 20, it's one of, 90,000 or some, combination of patterns. It's so specific to you that you just buy in immediately.
We've even had some employees that have come to us and said, hey, can my spouse take that? Or can my, daughter take that or whomever? Because they do see the benefit for them outside of, the workplace too, which is kind of fun.
Well, I want to ask, how does that match up now that you don't have job descriptions that you're comparing it to? How do you use that with like a family member?
So for a family member, you kind of just ignore the bottom survey unless you're curious with how they're performing at work. But most of the time, I just, you ignore that and you just are looking at it from, okay, here's my temperament, here's your temperament. How can we communicate better together? How can we show up better? What are your needs that are clearly not being met? Even like simple tasks, like I am not a detail oriented person. I don't like going grocery shopping. I never have a list. I don't know what I'm getting when I go there. And as a result, I'm there 6 days a week where my husband is detail oriented. And so we decided, okay, you do the grocery shopping. So it just kind of helps you make decisions like that outside the workplace too.
Conor, I'm betting you go to the grocery store with a list.
I absolutely go to the grocery store with a list, and so does my wife.
They have it down. They have it down.
What are some of the biggest lessons learned as you implemented this?
I think the first thing that I always tell people, because I've encouraged a lot of people to at least have a conversation with Randy about it because it has been that impactful for us. But the first thing I always tell people, and, forgive me, Randy, if you're like rolling your eyes when I say this, but I think you'd agree, be ready for it, because once you decide to use it, once you look at it, once you see the data, you kind of got to do something, right? Like now all of a sudden you see all these things and you're like, oh, all right, well, what do I do now? And the answer is you take action and you have to start moving people. You have to start figuring out and having some hard decisions around, is this really the right fit? They've been here for, 10 plus years, but this is obviously not the right thing. And so be ready is, I would say, the number one thing. But maybe that's the number two thing. The number one thing is this is awesome. You have to do it. But the number two thing is be ready, because now all of a sudden your hand is going to be forced. But those are kind of like, I would say, the biggest things. Danielle, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, definitely the biggest one is if you're not ready to make changes, it might not be the right time to do it because you really have to take action. Typically, things are not perfect. So for those pieces that are not perfect, you really can't unsee it and you really need to take action. So if you like to just ignore it, that's one thing. But yeah, things will definitely come up. I just want to give a shout out to Randy too, because she is awesome. So the Culture Index program, there's all sorts of facilitators and people that, you could get kind of like linked up with as a consultant. Randy is the woman that I was speaking to, and she's the one that has handled now some people in the water treatment space, and she is great. So I think there's just a lot of trust with her through this process too. We have monthly check-ins now with Randy, and I kind of thought that a lot of those check-ins would be sort of like wasted time or irrelevant. So one thing that I'm still learning is that Culture Index and these sorts of decisions never goes away. Every single month we have, okay, well, we're thinking about this job. We have an issue here. So it's just been really surprising to me how important this tool has been throughout every aspect of our business.
Yeah, and a couple just additional thoughts there on Randy. One, I'll say she's actually speaking at the business owners meeting for the Association of Water Technologies this year in Colorado Springs. So everyone that goes to that will get to see and meet her, which I think is really exciting. She does have experience now within the water treatment industry, and kind of understands it a bit. And so I would say if there is an interest in Culture Index, for sure to do it and engage with Culture Index through Randy. That's going to be the best thing for the listeners. The other kind of piece there, as Danielle is saying, is there's so much more to it the more you go. It's like you keep peeling back layers of the onion, and it's like I'm learning something new every day. And you talk to someone like Randy and you're like, oh my gosh, this is impressive. The amount of like discernment that can be had from these surveys, and it just helps clarify our thinking and our approach and our decision making around big investment decisions. So like it really is helpful. And I think Danielle thinks Randy's like my quasi therapist because I call her so much with questions and she's so willing to engage with me.
Yes, you have to understand, Trace, part of the reason that I was like, okay, Conor, let's do Culture Index was so that Randy got some of the phone calls that I was getting. So she helps manage Conor now. It's great.
Well, my final question, you just now have one word or phrase about Culture Index from when you started to right now. What would that word or phrase be for each of you?
I guess this word isn't necessarily how I feel about Culture Index, but the word I would use in relation to the Culture Index program is just transparency. This gives you so much transparency around your business, around the people in your business, around the decisions that you're making.
Well, Danielle Scimeca, Conor Parrish of Fact Water, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast, letting our audience know about the Culture Index. And I'll put some information leading people to Randy and also some more information. So if they want to learn more about Culture Index, we'll make that a little bit easier for them. Thanks for sharing so much about your experiences and the program.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Trace.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to get to speak with the Scaling Up Nation.
Well, Conor, Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up podcast once again and sharing your experiences about Culture Index. And Nation, I'm going to let you know, they referenced Randy Fargen quite a bit. Well, don't worry. She's our guest next week. So we're going to learn so much more about the Culture Index. So you heard how it's being used in business. And I will let you know that since this podcast interview was recorded, I have done a lot of work with Culture Index within my company. And folks, it is as good a tool, if not better, than everything that Conor and Danielle told us about. It is fantastic. And of course, we talk about a lot of things on our show, and it doesn't compete with any of the assessments, with any of the tools that we've talked about before. In fact, in my opinion, it enhances all of them. So you want to make sure that you stay tuned for next week, where we have Randy Fargen, Culture Index expert, and you are going to learn so much about this tool. I cannot wait until next week. But until then, if you have an idea for a show, or if you have a guest that you want me to interview, or if you've got some ideas about what you want to see next Industrial Water Week, please go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our show ideas page, and let me know all of that information. Because, Nation, that is how we ensure that we have next week's show. Now, we've got great ideas, but we need more. And without the Scaling Up Nation helping us out, Nation, I don't know how far we can go. So help us, help you, and let us know what all of those great thoughts are. Nation, once again, I know I'm a week late, but happy Industrial Water Week. And I can't wait until I'm with you next week with a brand new episode of Scaling Up H2O. Have a great week, folks. No more going it alone. Feeling isolated in your professional journey? The Rising Tide Mastermind is here to change that. Connect with a supportive network of professionals who understand your challenges and are committed to your success. Don't be an island. Consider joining the Rising Tide Mastermind. Go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind to find out if the mastermind is right for you.